So you started out at Arioscope Pictures as Adam Green's assistant. I want to know, what was it like working so close to Adam, and how did that experience like shape you as a filmmaker?
It's a good question. Yeah, so I started out. I knew Will Barrett first, who was Adam's DP, and I met Will in Boston. And when I moved out to LA, I called up Will and I was like, "Hey, are you still working on that movie?" I didn't know it was Hatchet, but I knew he was working on a movie. And he said, "Yeah, why don't you come in the office? Maybe we could use your help." And I didn't know, but they wanted me to be Adam's assistant.
Oh, cool.
So that's kind of how it started. And that lasted about 2 weeks, maybe. And then they needed someone to re-edit the entire movie for Hatchet because they needed to redo the color. And back then, if you didn't have the EDL, for editing, it's like a text document that tells you where all the cuts are. If you didn't have that, then it's like impossible to color grade your movie. And they didn't have it. So they needed someone to take the raw footage and a copy of the DVD, which is the only cut that they had, and match it. So match cut from the DVD. So I offered to do it, which is like a horrible, thankless job. And I did it in like 3 days, and that kind of solidified me as like the tech guy at Arioscope. So after that, I really wasn't really his assistant anymore. I was kind of like another producer.
Yeah.
And and then we became friends. So it was more like a friendship than anything else. And everything is super collaborative over there. And so we just started making movies together, and that's kind of how that happened. I think what I've learned from Adam as a director is to be collaborative, because he was very good at like taking suggestions from people and incorporating them into his directing style, which was really good. A lot of people don't want to hear anything from anyone else, and he was always open to and receptive of everything.
The reason I ask is because we've interviewed Adam a couple times, and a lot of the guys that he works with, we've interviewed as well. And so this is the first time I'm getting to talk to you. And obviously, you've worked on a ton of these films that I just absolutely adore. But instead of bringing all those films up, what I want to talk to you about and ask you about is, how the hell did they talk you into the Jack Chop cameo?
Well, we're all from Boston,
yeah.
So it was pretty easy. And that short was actually really fun because Adam had like an idea of what he wanted, but he kind of left the dialogue open. So on set, Adam and I were just like throwing out lines to Paul, and we were just coming up with the most ridiculous like Boston accent lines ever. And so yeah, that was a super fun short to work on. And then we came up with the idea to have two guys from Lynn be trash pickers. So it had to be me and Adam.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Before I move on to Bloodhound, I know you mentioned Hatchet a moment ago. Do you have any news, or is there any insight as far as the Victor Crowley franchise? Do you have anything that you know, or anything you're able to mention?
No, I haven't really worked with Adam in like a while. Maybe like 6 or 7 years, actually.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so actually when the last Hatchet movie came out, I didn't even know.
Oh, well, that's crazy.
I didn't know they filmed it because it was such a secret.
Yeah.
And but my producing partner is Perry Shen, who's in the Hatchet movies.
Yeah.
And he was like, "I want you to come to the screening. It's a surprise." And I was like, "Okay." And it was the one where they released, Victor Crowley.
Yeah.
So that was fun.
That's
but yeah,
cool,
I'm not really part of that group anymore. So I kind of wanted to branch off and do my own thing.
Yeah, and I'm definitely glad you did. It's just I had to get those out of the way, just because when I get the PR releases, it kind of like it highlights all of those things, but at the same time, there's so much other stuff to talk about, including Bloodhound.
Yeah.
While I have seen it, can you tell my audience a little bit about the film and like kind of, I guess, the elevator pitch, if you will?
Yeah, it's about a private detective who's looking for a missing woman, and he's also kind of famous in his own little way because he recorded all of his previous cases, and he's trying to make like a reality TV show eventually. And so one of his cases, he caught a suicide on camera, and that got him a lot of notoriety. And so he's kind of an always working private detective. And so he takes this case, and it's a missing woman, and then he's off and running, and he's got a new cameraman, and it gets a little crazy.
And what was your writing process like? Because you wrote and directed this, I'm kind of curious as to like how you came up with ideas, or like what sort of routine you had.
So this one kind of came together really fast. I had the idea for the character of Abel Walker, and because I knew I wanted to make a movie about a quirky, like, weird dude that you don't know if he's normal or he's off, or, you know, or if you should believe him or not. And so I had that idea first, and then I forget the process exactly, but I quickly came up with the idea of a like a detective noir film.
Yeah.
And when I did that, a lot of times when I'm writing, I'll drive around late at night if I can't figure out what I need to do, and I'll just dictate into my phone. And so I was doing that on this movie, and I decided I wanted to go to downtown LA in the middle of the night because I felt like that was the right inspiration for it. And so while I was writing it, I was kind of doing rounds in downtown LA at night, which is kind of scary. But it's also like super inspiring because you see this entirely different society happening in the streets of LA, like in the middle of the night. It's really weird.
Yeah, it's I can totally relate to that. I used to work in signs and lighting, and one of my jobs was to kind of go out at night and record to myself lights that were out. And I live in Houston. I mean, it's a large city, so I would go to parts of town that I would never normally, go and venture to, and I would see the craziest stuff. And I'm recording myself live, and the next morning I would go back and listen to those tapes, and it was almost kind of a surreal thing, like listening back to those tapes because it felt so vivid, re-listening or revisiting the night before. Keeping that in mind, it reminds me of the film Nightcrawler, and this film gets kind of compared to Nightcrawler and Seven. The tone is definitely there. For someone that saw this project all the way through, how do you feel about those types of comparisons?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely. I mean, it's an honor to be compared to Nightcrawler because that's an amazing movie. And it's one of my favorite movies, actually. And I wrote this around the same time that came out. I think I wrote it before, but I'm sure I did another draft after I watched that movie. So the inspiration was probably there. But yeah, I definitely love the tone of the movie that I actually was going for the tone of was 8mm. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah, with Nicolas Cage. Yeah, the movie still scares me to this day, man.
Yeah, it's just such a creep. Like, you feel dirty after you watch that movie.
Yeah.
And I feel like I wanted to make something that like made you feel uncomfortable, and so that was like the ultimate goal for Bloodhound.
What's interesting about you mentioning 8mm is that having seen the film, I actually feel like it's more similar to 8mm. Your writing process, however, would be more close to the Nightcrawler.
Yeah, maybe that's what the comparison is.
Let's talk about the cast a little bit. Obviously, a lot of people you've worked with before. How did the cast come together? Because it's quite eclectic across the board.
Yeah, so I'm actually really proud of the cast because I feel like I went out of my way to cast people that were just really good actors and not necessarily a name or, someone you would associate as a leading role. And with Ed Ackerman specifically, he's an amazing actor.
Yeah.
And I got to actually direct him in both movies that he's in for Adam Green. In Frozen, he's playing a character based off of, it's named after me, Jason. And and for whatever reason, they had some kind of technical issue, so his scene had to be reshot, and I ended up directing part of that. So that was like my first introduction to Ed. And then on Hatchet 2, I was directing a lot of the second unit, and for whatever reason, again, I was scheduled to direct Ed's death scene. So all his death scene, that whole boat montage in Hatchet 2, I directed all that.
Oh, awesome, man.
It was just like me, him, and a camera guy, and we just kind of went off. So I really became friends with Ed, and I really admire his acting. And he also did, so then I did a short film called Probed about two hillbilly guys that get abducted by aliens, and they keep probing one of them, and the other one gets to do whatever. He's having a good time, and Ed's the guy that's getting probed the whole time, and Dave Foy, who's the cameraman in Bloodhound, is the other guy. So we had so much fun making that short film that I was like, you guys have to be in something together, and Ed has to be the leading man. It just has to be that way. So I kind of knew I wanted to cast them from the beginning.
Yeah, what I like about Ed is he's so familiar for me, especially anyone that has a big fan of genre films. Like they've had to come across him twice, or at least twice. I like the fact that you cast him as the leading man because it was just such a fantastic choice, and he knocked it out of the park. Did you have him in mind for that role, or was that something that kind of came later after the chips started to lie, or chips started to fall?
Yeah, I had a very short list. I had two people on my list, and I don't know if I should say who the other person is because you know who he is.
Well, it's all good. that way, at least you're not burning bridges.
It's not that I picked one over the other. It was just that after I finished writing the script, I realized that Ed was the guy. I'm not going to say who the other person is.
Yeah.
But Ed was the guy. So that's yeah. As soon as the script was done, I was like, "Oh, this is Ed." Even though it's nothing like who he is, I just knew that he could pull off the role.
Well, and the fact that they already had the chemistry, with the short film. I mean, at that point, it's just kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And
sure, yeah.
With the film, the ending for me was a lot of fun, and I don't really want to spoil it, but did you have any alternate endings in mind? Was that the ending from the beginning?
No, that was always I wrote the ending first before I wrote anything else. So it was always that was going to happen. Actually, so it's hard to talk about without ruining the movie, but what happens physically that we see was always the ending, but the idea of who kind of takes over the camera work, we'll say, that came about in the writing process.
See, that was my favorite aspect of the ending, and I think that's what a lot of people are going to enjoy when they see this film. Not only will it catch them off guard, but ultimately it just packs a stronger punch by making that transition, if you will.
Yeah, thank you. That was kind of like when I was writing, I was like, oh, what if this happens? That's a good idea.
Yeah. And is there anything else that you would have done differently? Is there, looking back on the project, I'm sure that there's stuff that you would have done differently, but is there anything that jumps out at you? Is man, I wish we would have shot this or done that?
I mean, I wish I had a real budget. That would have been the best part. I had a very small, tiny budget for this movie, so I kind of had to do the best that I could with what I had. So we shot really quick. I think we shot in. It was supposed to be 6 days, but we ended up doubling it to 12 days.
Holy shit. That's crazy.
Yeah. The hardest part was for the actors, actually, because they had to memorize like 12 pages of dialogue every day, and I didn't realize that going in.
Yeah.
Because my first movie, Unidentified, which is a found footage movie too, it's a lot of improv. So the script had the bare bones of what we were doing, but then I would just get the guys kind of talking, and it was easier for them to like come out with 12 pages of dialogue when they're just making it up, right?
Yeah.
But for this one, it was very, it was scripted, so Ed had to do a lot of memorizing lines, and then throw on top of that he had to drive a car while we were shooting and memorize his lines. It was really rough on him, but he was a trooper, and he nailed it. Like he was great.
See, I was actually curious about that too, because a lot of the scenes in the car seemed very off the cuff. So that's pretty crazy to me, knowing that they had to memorize those lines as well as drive the car.
Yeah.
So you mentioned your last film is also a found footage film. Are you going, or like, is there any plans for the future to maybe do something outside of that realm? I know that budget plays a big role in that, but where do you see yourself next? Like, what comes after Bloodbound?
Yeah,
Bloodhound.
Oh yeah, that's fine. Well, found footage is kind of dead, so it's like it's not something I'm probably going to revisit again. The thing I liked about Bloodhound being, I don't really consider it found footage. It's more like documentary style because of the way it's edited.
Yeah.
My first movie, Unidentified, is like you find the memory card of this camera, and that's what it is, and that was the conceit of it. But I have finished my third feature, and it's not found footage. It's a sci-fi comedy.
Excellent.
And it stars Perry Shen from Hatchet and Bria Grant. She's do you know who she is?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm a
She's also
big fan of Perry. I've been following him since Better Luck Tomorrow. So.
Yeah, Perry's awesome, and I really love his role in my new movie because it's kind of the opposite of what he's ever played. So I think that one's going to be fun.
Do you have a title for that one, or are you allowed to talk about it at all?
I mean, I can talk about it, but I don't have a title for it. Actually, that's one of the things that's been plaguing me is coming up with a title for this movie. And I'm just waiting for the right title to come out. But so right now we'll say it's untitled.
Okay. Well, I guess in that case, what you need to do is drive around LA, and maybe it'll come to you, man. That's really all I have for you, unless you have anything else you want to throw out there about Bloodhound.
No, I mean it's available now, so if you can direct people to watch it on iTunes or Google Play or wherever they can download it, except illegal places.
Sure.
And that would be great.
Yeah, Bloodhound's available now, digital HD, and I'll definitely throw some links on there. If you guys have any questions, you can let me know or let Jason R. Miller know, and we will make it happen. Here at CineDump, Jason, we let the doers know how they're doing, and you're doing just fine. I appreciate your time, sir.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Not a problem. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.